What's going on? This is the PUBCast, episode 6 or 7, doesn't matter. We are here tonight. You see another face. So first, I'm going to start it off with Poro, the NA, ketchup, barbecue sauce, Budweiser, and fireworks, the American Dream PUBCast analyst. How's it going, Poro? How's it going?
It's going great, Dave. Going great. Can't wait
right.
to talk about PGI stuff today.
I salute you. And then all the way in the far corner, resident EU, sausage and mash, crumpets and tea. EU resident Krimson. How's it going, Krimson?
Hey, man. Yeah. Good,
all right.
I'm all crumpeted up.
All crumpeted up and teed up. This guy's ready to go here. And then our new face down from the sushi enthusiast, Komenchi lover, Korean analyst for tonight's cast. I think it's Komenchi. How do you say it? Kimchi lover, Clinton, aka Paperthinhere. How's it going,
man? Good to see you, man. Thanks for bringing me in.
Yeah, thanks for bringing you in. So just make sure you PayPal us each individually after this episode, and
no problem.
I'll post it. I'll make sure to post it. But all right, so we're gonna get right into this. We're gonna be directing a lot of questions this episode, more or less, to Clinton over here, and more specifically about the Korean scene, right? So let's get right into this. We just got a couple announcements. PGI qualifiers, Korea. Clinton, lay it on us, man. I'm just gonna leave it like that. Yeah.
So we don't have a specific qualifier league here in Korea. We actually have 3 different ongoing tournaments that you use to qualify for the PGI. So there's 3 tournaments. There's the one I do, the APL, the Africa PUBG League. Then there's also the OGN PUBG League called the PSS, the PUBG Survival Series. And then there's another league done by a company called SPO TV, which is the PWN, the PUBG War Masters something. I think it's PUBG War Masters. Mm-hmm. And so these 3 leagues are usually run about a month each. And you can qualify for the PGI by doing well in these leagues. So the first place, if you get a first place finish in one of these leagues, you get 5,000 points towards qualifying for the PGI, right? And so on, and second place gets less points, and so on and so forth. So these 3 leagues together for the next couple months will determine what teams from Korea qualify for the PGI. The top 2 teams with the most points end up being the ones that qualify.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm gonna pass it to Poro, with the hot opinions, and then of course Krimson to kind of counteract that, hopefully. So you made a mention league points. I'm gonna leave it at that, Poro. League points.
Yeah, it must be great to have a region where there's 3 ongoing running leagues. If only we had that in NA and EU, maybe they could have worked with us to maybe not have to go through this crazy open qualifier process where there's teams that are waiting up till like 5 a.m. to get their 4th game in. I don't know. I mean, it's crazy. Korea. I know the Koreans getting 2 spots for PGI. North America getting 3. EU are getting 3. I don't understand it. I don't understand why. We have GLL, we have Awesome, we have PUBG Online. And on top of others, Curse, obviously, ESU. There's tons of leagues. But the longest running, I believe, has been PUBG Online, Awesome, and I believe GLL. It's right behind the Curse. Might be a little bit before, but Curse is weird. But yeah, I just don't understand why. It's not like tournament organizers haven't been reaching out since the beginning. Trying to work with PUBG Online or PUBG Core, saying like, hey, tell us what rule sets you want to incorporate, and it's just kind of like we've never heard anything. So that's how we've got the 16 teams. That's how we got the circle settings. That's how we've gotten the setup that we have. And now it's like they're just like, okay, well now we're interested, so we're just going to put it all on Korea. And like NA, you guys just go and do your own thing. You have an open qualifier process. I don't know. It just seems weird.
Krimson?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends what you think is the better method, right? But I mean, we've talked about open qualifiers and potentially the issues with open qualifiers, and and if nothing else, just the sheer amount of time and effort it takes to run through. Whereas, I'm sure most of the teams would love to have that Korean system that they're doing for those PGIs. It definitely seems weird to me, whether you do one or the other. Why don't you do them all across all the leagues? And I think probably I mean, one of the problems is going to be like Oceania and South America, right, and the Middle East. Those guys don't have the ability to have multiple, tournaments running and give points for each tournament and that sort of thing. So they would have to have qualifiers either way. But then, yeah, it's weird that they've gone for that system and just completely different, because it is going to be different, right? I mean, I guess it's a fairer system in Korea, I would say, because you've got a lot more games to play. It's a lot longer period of time. You get more consistent teams coming through compared to I mean, everyone knows the issues with open qualifiers. Yeah.
So kind of before going into this, Clinton was kind of describing to us. It felt like maybe a reason, right? How PUBG Corp is in Korea, right? South Korea, to be specific.
Yeah.
So I mean, do you want to kind of explain that? And do you think that might be why? Like, is this something that you can see moving forward that is going to be implemented? I mean, that's kind of what Krimson said. Like, we don't mind it, but it's just not implemented across everything, right? What's the culture there? PUBG, South Korea. I mean, what's going on with that?
PUBG is huge here in South Korea. It's absolutely huge. If you go to the PC cafes called PC Bongs here in Korea, they're just everywhere. Everybody is playing PUBG in these PC Bongs. I mean, I go in there, and I play with my friends sometimes, and I could play from home, but it's kind of cool to go out there, and they'll bring your food to your desk. Like, you can order drinks like coffee and other things, and you can order your own food like ramen and hot dogs and all this other stuff. So it's a lot of fun to just kind of go. But here in Korea, PUBG is dominating the PC cafe culture right now. Everybody is playing it. It's just insane. Nobody's playing Fortnite. It's all PUBG. There's some other stuff. Some people still play League of Legends.
Utopia.
No
it
Fortnite
really is.
and no Fortnite.
No. But it's quite beautiful, and I think part of the reason, I'd say there's two reasons. One, PUBG in itself is just really appealing in the game itself. It's a lot of fun. It's very competitive. It's very difficult to be good at, and Koreans like difficult video games, right? They've loved StarCraft for forever. They've embraced that culture. It's a part of the reason I'm here in Korea is I love esports, and I love things like StarCraft and that kind of thing. But on top of that, PUBG is also a Korean company. I think there's kind of a national ethos where they want to play games that are, from their country. It's kind of part of their culture. They really like things that are Korean, and they're very proud of it. Just like anybody would be from any country. You're proud of the things from your country. So I think that's a big part of why Korea is so huge why PUBG is so huge in Korea.
Poro, I don't know.
I mean, okay. No, I agree. I agree with everything you said.
Yeah.
No, like everything. No, everything you said.
disagree.
Like, no. It all. I mean, obviously, it's like facts, right? It all makes
facts.
sense.
Hot
But
facts.
like, I guess me. I'll try to be probably poorly, but I'll try to be the voice of the player base from NA, from NA, and to a large extent EU as well.
Crimson's EU. Crimson.
I know that Crimson's EU, but
taking his job. All right,
it's kind of like it almost feels like a slap in the face almost that since the game, like, I mean, we started casting PUBG Online stuff about a month after the game came out, was available on Steam. Like, the competitive scene really picked it up really quickly in NA and EU, and for over a year now, it's been tons of work by tournament organizers, tons and tons of work by players, from both NA and EU sides, trying to find ways to make it work, trying to find ways to make PUBG as an esport viable and fun to watch and to get viewers in there. And now it feels like all of that was just kind of like ignored. Like, they just didn't even care. And now it's, they've kind of focused in on the Korean scene because they are a Korean-based organization. And I guess, it makes sense that it's going to work out that way, but it still feels bad, man. It feels bad, man.
Krimson?
Yeah, I mean, possibly it's more of a kind of tester, maybe. Maybe they didn't feel like, as I say, because the other regions, there's not just NA and EU, there's obviously a bunch of regions, right, and they can't run leagues for every single region. There just, there isn't the amount of the player base and that sort of thing to do it. So maybe it is a bit of like a tester for that region. We'll see how that works using that point system to do the qualifiers rather than open qualifiers, see if it's better, see if it's worse, that sort of thing. I can see that point of view, and obviously I can imagine from PUBG Core's kind of side, it's going to be difficult to get those tournament organizers on your side now. I mean, obviously, as you say, they probably should have dealt with that earlier, but they couldn't really turn around now and say, right, you guys are going to have to all change your leagues to our competitive settings because, do that. Otherwise, you won't get a PGI spot and all that sort of thing. I think that would probably cause a lot of problems. They probably just don't want to have to deal with that,
I mean, but that's kind of what we've been asking for forever, right? We've been asking for input from them, and trying to get them to get involved.
But what it's like. They ask for input, and then they don't want the the answers. That's the problem.
That is true. That is true. But I mean, I think if it came down and that this is what PUBG Core wants, and this is how competitive is going to be from here on out, then the player base would just, kind of like, they'd bitch about it, but then they do it. Because at the end of the day, this is their job.
Yeah. The meme, adapt, but it's the truth. I mean, it's a meme, but it's the truth, right? Adapt. And thanks, Poro, for that. That brings us really, really great transition into the next point.
I'm good at that.
You're so good at that. So
professional.
In Korea, right? From my understanding, 24 teams, right? PSS, 24 teams.
I got lots of questions about this.
Clint, so
it was yes, it was 24 teams, but now they've changed it to 20. So they're trying to mimic what the settings will be for the PGI tournament itself, right? Mm-hmm. We know that the PGI tournament will be 2 games of TPP, 1 in Erangel, 1 in Miramar, and then 2 games of FPP, 1 in Erangel and 1 in Miramar. Now the APL has adapted to that format. The PSS and the PWM had already done that. Now you're right. To start out with, the APL was 24 teams, and that was chaos. That was a lot of teams, right?
Yeah.
So,
yes, it was.
Yes, and as fun as that kind of was as a caster in a way,
and from the
it
viewer.
Was still too much. Yeah, for sure. It was kind of interesting to see really like a max, setting competitive PUBG tournament, right? We have the most teams, but now they've changed it to 20 teams. So we will, in the next season of the APL, which starts about a week from today, we will be doing 20 teams instead of 24, which I'm very happy with that change.
All right.
Yeah.
Poro?
It's interesting.
Yeah, what's so interesting about it?
Because
we had 18, then 16, and now 20, right?
We had 20.
Yeah, so we started with 20, then 18, then 16, now back to 20. I feel like it's because of South Korea, right, that we're going back up.
I mean, none of the leagues are going back up to 20. Are you kidding me?
I think in the future they will, though. That's just my opinion.
They might have to, yeah.
They might have to. But Poro, go. Your take.
I mean, I was interested to see kind of like what the player feedback on that was, especially from the teams that have competed in, international lands, like MVP or CJ Antis. Like, how did they feel about, first of all, about 24 teams, and then how do they feel about 20? Is there any like blowback coming from any of the teams, or are they just kind of more, let's just shut up and take it? Same kind of goes with the TPP FPP thing. That's kind of like, I guess that's a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a pretty welcome change here. You could definitely tell during some of the player interviews during the tournaments that they were kind of not really big fans of the fact that there are 24 teams. They wouldn't outright come and say that they didn't like it or that they thought it should change, but they'd be like, wow, 24 teams is a lot. Early game, there's a lot of fighting compared to other tournaments we've been in. You heard this a lot from Entis Ace. They would talk about how, they've competed in these foreign tournaments and that they, it's just a lot different because there were so many more teams, and they did, Star Ladder and these other, PGL, there was only 16 teams, right? So it was a very big, change they had to adapt to. And they definitely, I think, are more happy with the 20 teams. I don't know if they would actually prefer 16 or 20. I haven't actually heard any of them say anything one way or the other. But they're definitely happier with 20 versus 24.
I can't imagine not being. I mean, 24. Just from the first couple of weeks that I was able to catch and watch. I mean, that was absolute madness. I mean, you couldn't rotate. You just couldn't. It was impossible to safely rotate anywhere. I mean, It was just everybody running in. And I think at the time too, when I saw this, I mean, this was a couple of weeks ago, but it seemed like there was more of a meta of kind of edge play. And so just a lot of teams hanging out on the edge, and it was like you would go thinking, and that was how teams were dying. Like it wasn't a question of like, a 1v1 or a 4v4 team fight or a team breaching a building. It was just a team rotating and just getting wiped off the map because they just happened to run into another 4-man squad.
Yeah, and the Korean scene, they play very much more passive than I've seen a lot of NA and EU teams play. So we'd have situations where we'd be 22, 23 minutes into the game and we'd still have 18 teams, right, with like 70 people. And it would just be crazy how many teams I would see on the map. We'd be, 4 or 5 circles in, and I'm seeing just it's nothing but teams on these circles, and it's crazy. And so I'm happy with the 20-team change. I think it'll be better. Although we did start to see later on in the APL, at least, where the edge play kind of wasn't as favored for a little while, where teams like Entus Ace and they used to be called KSV No Title, now they're called Genji Black, would just take a very aggressive position early on where they would rotate dead into the center of the circle, maybe third circle, and just try to hold a compound or a position there. And it did work kind of, but then we saw the edge play kind of start to work more for them, other teams later on.
Crimson, you got anything?
They're watching EU.
Yeah, you got anything?
Yeah.
We're talking EU now. You got anything
Yeah, well,
to
I
add to
mean-
this?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be tricky, isn't it? Because I think it's going to be more difficult to go from 16 to 20 than it is to go from 24 to 20, right? So that already, there's a bit of an advantage there. I mean, you're going to be used to having to fight your way to every position when you're playing in 24 teams for, or even just playing 20 teams if they do that in the other leagues in Korea as well. So, I mean, that's going to be interesting to see. I know a lot of the teams, I mean, there's one side of it, which is the meta side, the overall kind of the rotation element and whether you center and all that kind of stuff is going to change with the amount of teams in the game. But I know at least at the moment, all you hear feedback-wise is obviously the performance of the game and how it's hard to play with 20 teams. And, that's a whole different thing, which, I don't want to ignore it, but at the same time, it doesn't, I obviously get the problems that they're going to have, but they always complain about the FPS in custom games, and I don't think it's going to, make a huge amount of difference either way, if that makes sense. I'd rather look at it as an overall thing, if it's going to be an ongoing thing, and just kind of assume that the servers are going to get fixed to the point where it's playable as a playable FPS and that sort of thing with 20 teams. I'd rather look at it as, is the meta going to be better with 20 teams than 16? Is it going to be more fighting early game? That's one of the arguments people say. Is there going to be, is that the reason that PUBG Corp want to do that? They sort of said that they want to bring it more towards the kind of public play that you get where, there's 100 people on the map, right? So, I don't know what you guys think about that, whether you think that the meta at 20 teams, taking the server issues aside, taking the FPS issues and all the other things that people complain about, do you think having 20 teams is just going to be better than 16 teams overall in the meta, or do you think that more space to rotate, that sort of thing, do you think that's better for the game?
All right. I mean, I know from my perspective, it's boring, right? Early game could be boring. You might see a couple early kills on rotations, a couple BM kills, punch outs, but I mean, the first couple circles, especially in EU Crimson, I'm sorry.
I don't think
it's boring, man. It's boring.
I
It's
think
boring.
it's super interesting. But
I mean, it's interesting, the rotations, right?
As the passive PUBG guy.
I guess I'm more NA than you, Poro, because I like I like violence, and something needs to be grabbing my attention throughout the whole match, right? I need to be entertained, and we want to grow the scene, right? So, I mean, I feel like as a new time viewer, you've never seen competitive before, you might be bored, sitting down for the first time. That's just my opinion, guys. Don't hate me for
if I can, I'll jump in and because I think, this is probably something we could do a whole another episode on, which is why I think PUBG.
Did that are going to Fortnite now.
Is why I think PUBG is good as a shooter, but I mean, like the very basic thing for me is I think I prefer it because there's that tactical element as well as the firefighting element, right? It's not like CS, it's more like, to me, like I'm a big StarCraft fan, right? It's a lot more like, feels a lot more like StarCraft to me. The initial kind of strategies that you do, there's a couple of fights, there's early game kind of maneuvers that you make to get a good position, but you're looking at the overall game, the kind of how everything plays out for your team. And that to me is what makes it unique, I think, and interesting. So for me personally, I think 16 teams is better for the meta, but whether you can convince the general viewer that is interesting to watch, because I say, oh, cool, look at these rotations, look at this, this center versus edging play, all this sort of stuff, that takes a while to get into and understand, and and I can see the argument against that.
So we're about almost halfway done here, and I want to get some more opinions from Clint over here. We kind of made mention of differences between Korea, the Western scene, and all that. Even third party or third person, first person. First of all, I feel like NA is playing third person because of you guys in these upcoming tournaments. Poro, you agree with me on that one, right? Like they hate it. They hate third person. A lot of the players do. So Clint, what else is the main difference, the takeaways between the two different scenes, right?
Sure. So in Korea, like originally when we had PUBG here in Korea, we had a Korea-Japan server, right? And they actually took away the ability to play first person because nobody was playing it. Actually, PUBG is very big in Japan as well. A lot of people don't maybe know that. Like they have their own PUBG League there. It's not broadcast in English right now, but you could watch it. It's on, I think it's on Twitch. And so in China as well, which we have a lot of Chinese teams actually playing in these Korean tournaments right now, TPP is still the dominant mode here in Asia. There hasn't really been a very huge first-person shooter outside of kind of Overwatch, right, that's been here in Asia. They never played CSGO, really. They have a game here in Korea called Sudden Attack that's kind of like a cartoony CS game. It's kind of fun, but it's kind of ridiculous. But they've never really played first-person shooters per se. So third person was kind of their more natural game that they wanted to do. So now they're going to have to adapt here. They're having to do first person. And we saw teams like Entis Ace do very, very well here in Korea because they had experience playing first person on lands. Actually, MVP has not done well here in Korea, which is kind of interesting. They've really struggled recently. But Entis Ace has done pretty well. A couple other teams, they used to be called KSV, now they're Gen G. They are pretty good at first person. There's a few other teams that do pretty well in it. But overall, the Asians are more used to third person outside of Thailand. Thailand really likes first person. There's a team from Thailand called Myth, which maybe someday you guys might be seeing them in the PGI because they're quite a good first person team.
Poro? Yeah. Well, what do you want to add to this topic or discussion between the differences, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, it's something that you've kind of seen in all the international tournaments that we've seen so far, right? Is that you're the best teams for Korea, then they're forced into playing first person, and they kind of finish or kind of middle of the pack. Although you have seen a couple of teams that have come in with wins, but generally it's very kind of feast or famine. They either do really, really well by snaking and just staying alive and surviving and making it towards the end with kind of a lower kill count. But towards more recently with the international tournaments, we started seeing teams like Entis that have started kind of fragging out when they get in first person. So it's one of those things where Krimson was talking about how it's a lot easier to transition from 24 teams to 20 than from 16 to 20. I feel like it's a lot easier to transition from FPP to TPP than it is to transition from TPP to FPP. It's especially going into these games. So, like, I don't think that any of the NA or EU, like any of these pros, are going to be like freaking out over the fact that they have to play in TPP. But I think that you'll see a definite performance reduction in some of the teams that aren't very used to the FPP when they have to switch from third to first person.
All right, Krimson. So my question to you is for you to direct the question to Clint. All right. Anything that I might have missed, that you would want to get an answer from Clint.
Oh man. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll think about that. I'm just gonna add a little bit to what we just previously said.
If he doesn't have one,
Okay. All right. You do one after. Yeah. No, I just wanted to kind of add a guess that I'm actually really excited to see the TPP at PGI, because I think that's probably going to level the playing field better between between all the regions, right? Because as Poro mentioned, I think a lot of the Western pros are kind of going, oh yeah, TPP, that's no problem. Yeah, I don't care. It's gonna be just as easy as FPP, But I mean, I'll be interested to see if that's the case, and I think if it just brings them to the same sort of level as, because the problem with FPP is obviously we're seeing the Korean teams not do as well as they should as a top team. I hope that does happen, and I hope it just creates a more balanced kind of, even if our pros in the West don't actually want to play it, I think it might actually end up with a more kind of balanced game than the classic kind of teams coming strong in the FPP every single time sort of thing. So I'm excited for that, if nothing else, even if everybody in the West is complaining about having to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're complaining about having to do third person because it means they can't play as aggressively as they're used to playing, really. I mean, you still can, but not in the way that you can with FPP. I mean, in third person, and like, oh my god, I could think of plays, like specific plays that I've seen from these international tournaments where you could say like that happened because they're used to playing third person, and that's why they like got absolutely destroyed right there. But anyway, I have one question.
Yeah.
So, what in general is the opinion of the Korean scene about these Western teams? Do they think that it's just like an insurmountable opponent in like FaZe and Liquid and EU? Do they think that NA is trash? I'm just kind of curious as to what the opinion is from there is about the rest of the scene, because like from our end, we don't really know a whole lot about it. All we know is that you're playing third person in 24 team, or we're playing 24 team lobbies, and they're just kind of like eye rolling it as far as the pro players go. So I'm just curious as to what everybody thinks about us.
They have a lot of respect, especially for the EU scene. We had FaZe come over here for the original PSS beta, is what they called it, in January. And Optic, yes, Optic as well. But FaZe ended up winning that tournament. So there's a lot of respect for them. Obviously, Entus Ace, MVP, and KSV have played internationally, so they know what it's like to play against these top teams. They want to get better, and I think they will. Right now, they definitely know they're not as good as the other regions, especially EU. They mostly compare themselves to EU. I don't think they have as much experience playing against NA teams as they do against EU, because we've had EU teams come to Korea to play. But they are trying to get better, and I think they will get better. And generally, when Korea decides to play an esport, they end up being the best at it, right? In Overwatch, League of Legends, StarCraft, whatever esport they decide to play that they want to be good at, they get good at it. So I think right now they definitely understand they're behind, but they're trying to catch up, especially with having 3 concurrent leagues going. They have a lot of practice, and I think when it comes to the PGI, there's a real shot that one of these teams could place top 5. I don't think a Korean team is going to win PGI. I don't think they're quite there yet, but I think maybe one of these teams could place top 5, especially because there's TPP involved.
I think we need the Kimchi, or Kim. How do you say
Kimchi.
That's the secret. That's the secret to success. And then we'll
got
send
probiotics.
Yeah, we'll send some NA teams over there to whoop you guys up, so you get some respect. So, Clint, last question of the show.
Sure.
And then we'll do the wrap ups here. So, over here, for the most part, in NA and EU, inspiring pros, right? People that want to get involved, they join open series, they network, talk to different teams and try out over Discords and private scrims. How does that work in Korea? How do inspiring pros get involved in the scene over there?
Sure. Actually, all of our tournaments here in Korea do have open qualifiers. Every tournament has at least 1 or 2 slots available for an open qualifier team to get in. So, for example, the APL, we had something like 200 teams try to qualify for the tournament. We had 2 open qualifier slots, so 2 teams ended up getting through and were able to compete. In fact, we saw one of the teams, they were called Team Shako, that did very well, at least on their first day playing in the APL. So if you want to be on a professional team, they have open qualifiers available for all these tournaments, and you can try to get in. As well as if you are just good, sometimes you'll just get picked up by a team, that sees your ladder ranking or something like that, and they'll be like, oh, cool, this guy's really good, let's bring him in. But it is kind of fun that we do have open qualifiers as well. In fact, right now, there's a duos qualifier going on for the APL.
All right, Krimson, Poro, anything? Yeah.
I'll kind of piggyback off of that, because you mentioned something interesting that if a player's doing really well in the leaderboards, that they might get a look at from a team. Do you find that public matchmaking is taken seriously there by the pro teams?
Yes and no. Some players definitely take it seriously, some don't. I mean, I've seen players that play in the Korean tournaments here, like some of the really good pros have like a 1600 ladder ranking. They don't necessarily take it that seriously once they're on a pro team, but before that, some of these other players who are trying to really make it and do well do take it very seriously. You know, they'll have 2100, 2200 rankings on the ladder here. So I'd say yes and no, but once you make it to a pro team, they don't care as much about it. They're scrimming all day, every day. They're constantly playing each other. There's about 40 teams, really, more or less, that are kind of the pro teams here in Korea. So they're always scrimming. They're always playing in these tournaments. I mean, usually these teams are playing probably 4 days a week in these leagues. So that alone is a ton of time. So once they make it to the scene, I don't think they care about it as much.
Yeah. So Krimson, you think of that question yet?
No, you already asked it, Dave. That was my question about the pros, but yeah. No,
hey, you can ask something else. I know you got something else brewing in there. Are you sure? Sure?
Nothing comes.
You look
to
like you have a
mind right
question.
now.
You look like
yeah, something. No.
All right,
Think of it for me.
Typical EU
Typical
arrogance.
EU.
What can we
Yeah,
possibly learn
we
from
already
any
know
other
everything there is to know about PUBG. You know?
All right. So since we're already Krimson, where can they find you? We're gonna wrap this up. Where can they find you?
Yeah, well, Twitter's the easy place, right? Twitter and and what can I plug today?
Oh.
I always plug PUBG Radar. I'll plug those guys. Check that out. That's literally every tournament is on there. They're really good guys. You can see a lot of posts and things of people saying, where do I watch these tournaments? That is where you can go and watch them. Everything that they can find is listed on there. So head over there. That's PUBG Radar.
And Reddit, right? Crimson.
Oh yeah, and the other one. Yeah, the other one's the competitive PUBG Reddit. I mean, all good esports have good subreddits pretty much. So, we're trying to build that one up. So check it out.
Build it up. Poro, hey, where can they find you when you're not watching a football game? Where can they find you?
eating hot dogs and shooting off fireworks. Got me at Porosaurus _NA on the Twitter tweets. Also there's a couple of events that are coming up, but I don't know.
Just say it.
I don't know.
Do it.
Oh well, I don't know if we're gonna get the video out before Monday, but we have a.
It's going out tonight.
If you're in the Dallas area, we're gonna be doing a live LAN with Team Envy, so you can come find out details about that event on Twitter. I will be there casting it live with the Envy boys and Mr. Matchroom, who many of you may know, and then you'll also be seeing me at DreamHack. I'm just gonna be roaming around in the fans, mixing with the populace, getting down with the unwashed masses. Yeah.
All right,
I promise you, I'll be the most unwashed out of all of them too.
All right, Clinton, how's it going, man? Yeah. Tell us, give us the deets.
Yeah, sure. There are 3 PUBG leagues. The one I do is the Africa PUBG League. You can find that on YouTube. We do not stream on Twitch currently. But if you search AfreecaTV Live on YouTube, you can find our channel. There's StarCraft on there as well. So this is kind of like one of the bigger esports companies here in Korea. You can watch the PSS and the PWM on Twitch as well. So anything Korean esports is available online in English for PUBG. You can watch it, and all the VODs are there as well. So you can go back and watch and catch up and that kind of thing. You can follow me on Twitter at Paperthinhere. I'm planning on doing some more PUBG content in the future, doing some YouTube videos breaking down the Korean PUBG scene and kind of dissecting their meta and kind of what's going on here soon. So keep an eye out for that.
That's awesome. So obviously we got first dibs when you need more English casters, right? I'm not going to go into that. It's in the books. It's in the books. We got it live.
Anytime you guys come to Korea, I'll buy you a bottle of soju. Come on out.
All right. Well,
I can't even get Dave to come to Austin. Like 2 states away.
Hey, my boy Rapid's going to DreamHack to cast StarCraft 2. So if you see him, say hi.
If he sees a tall drunk guy wearing a flag T-shirt with a Sampy Jempty emote,
tell him to keep an eye out. Yeah.
All right. This has been episode 6 or 7 of the PUBCast. Thank you, the panelist crew, everybody, for coming out here this evening, tonight, this morning, wherever, all the different time zones. It's crazy, but make sure you stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button because we are just going to be making it rain, PUBCast. So catch you next time. Bye.